Cesar Chavez was pretty amazing in that he was from a farm worker family and had only gone to, now I've forgotten whether it's the 6th or the 8th grade, I think it was the 8th grade. He started out working in Los Angeles with a group called Community Service Organization. And when he decided that the CSO should start organizing farm workers, there wasn't enough interest. So he went off on his own to do that. He started out going door to door talking about an association of farm workers. And I have notes that he originally didn't intend it to be a union. Who knows if that's actually accurate, but I remember not knowing very much about unions and thinking, well, an association would be a good thing to do. And so that first group was called National Farm Workers Association. And his cousin Manuel made this great red flag with a black Mexican eagle on it, and that's become the logo for the United Farm Workers as it evolved into, from an association into a labor union.
So Cesar was my dad's boss, and for a while my mom's boss, for maybe my dad's boss for maybe 15 years. My dad, Jim Drake, was Cesar's administrative assistant, and he was also one of the founding organizers for the UFW and the chief organizer for the East Coast grape and lettuce boycotts.
Working with the farm workers, because they were so hospitable to me, I was never really afraid until we had several incidents. One was we were on a picket line picketing a grape grower, and he drove up in his big old Cadillac, and my son Matt, who wasn't very old, like maybe 8 or 9, went up to the grower and just asked him why he was mad at the farm workers and why he didn't want to be helping the farm workers. And I was afraid at that point that the grower might, just let loose and do something with my son. Then the scariest time was on a picket line. The farm workers union was pitted against the Teamsters union that also wanted to organize the farm workers. And there's a whole story there, but the Teamsters at one point paid a group of guys that we called the garbage truck, and there were these big bruisers. They drove up to a picket line one morning, and I was out there with my small sons, and they had baseball bats. Well, first they sat on the back of their flatbed truck, and this one guy, I remember, was combing his hair. He was so bleh. And so then they started walking down the picket line, and one of them had a baseball bat and was swinging it. And when they got to where I was in the back of a friend's pickup truck with my 2 sons, they hit the man standing next to us, and I will never forget the sound of the bat hitting that man's. I don't know whether it was the bat hitting his head, or I think it was when the man fell to the cement that was the sound, but it was like a watermelon bursting. It was horrible. But they weren't actually threatening me. They were more threatening the men around.
So yeah, I think we often felt like we were in danger. There were times when we were boycotting, out front picketing with signs, Safeway, and people would try and run us down in their cars. And I think in hindsight, they probably weren't really going to run us down. They were just trying to scare us. But when you're 8 years old, that's pretty scary. And as my mom described, there was a time that we were out on a picket line out in the fields, and the Teamster goons came in and started literally busting heads. And somebody right next to me, actually I don't even know who it was, the guy had his head whacked in with a baseball bat, and his head, there was a sound. He got hit out of the back of the truck and fell out of the back of the truck. He was just sitting there, and we were sitting in the truck with him, and this guy just came up and just whacked him in the back of the head. and he fell out and he split his head open on the pavement. It's like blood everywhere. And the thing about that was, before it happened, those attacks were happening a lot, and so we were living in La Paz, and the guys would come up off the picket lines, and they would come in, and they would be beaten up and bloody, and so we saw that quite a bit. And as a kid, we were almost sort of excited about having it happen, but once it happened, it was really horrific. And I think part of the context of that too is that this is 1968, this is 1969. On the TV there are riots in Watts, and there are riots throughout the country, and the Vietnam War was going on, and my earliest memories are of going to my cousin's funeral from the Vietnam War. And so there was a sense that it was just a really violent time, and there, one person was killed in the strike, and I think there was a sense that when people were threatening us that it was very real. And in hindsight, I know they probably weren't going to hurt us because we were kids, but we didn't know that when we were kids. And then it was just dangerous to be a white kid living in one of these small farming communities where your friends were Mexicans, and yet you were white, so you weren't really part of that group. And the kids that you played baseball with, they were all the growers' kids, and they saw you as the enemy, so everybody beat the crap out of you. So yeah, we felt threatened all the time. So the purpose of the union was to organize people so they could earn a fair living wage, so organize farm workers so they could earn a fair living wage, the way teachers learn a fair living wage, the way plumbers or electricians earn a fair living wage. And that didn't happen. The vast majority of the people that are working out in the fields today are heavily exploited and are not actually earning a decent wage. And maybe statistically things are a little bit better for a few people, but as far as farm workers, but the problem still exists the way that it did exist. And it's nice that people want to remember Caesar as a great charismatic leader and an important figure, and he was all those things in the way that somebody like Martin Luther King was too. But what he really wanted was he wanted to improve the lives of the millions of people that pick our food, grow our food, harvest our food, plant our food, and ultimately that didn't actually happen. And that problem was never really addressed.
They stole a few elections, still we the people won. We voted out corruption, big corporations. We voted for an end to war, new direction. And we ain't gonna stop now till the job is done. Come on, all good workers, this year is our time. Now there's folks in Washington who care